Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Applying Ethology webinar. I'm Laura Whalen, a postdoctoral researcher at the Norwegian Veterinary Institute. As we begin today, I want to remind you all to please turn off your camera and microphone. Should you have questions for our speaker, please type them into the chat box and we will address them at the end of the presentation. It is a pleasure to introduce both Katarína Bučková and Ágnes Moravcsíková. Katarína completed her PhD at the Institute of Animal Science in Prague and is now a postdoctoral research associate at Iowa State University, where her research focuses on dairy cattle and pig welfare. Ágnes is a PhD student at the Czech University of Life Sciences in Prague, where she focuses on dairy calf welfare. We look forward to hearing your thoughts.
Okay, so am I okay to start?
Yep.
Okay, so good evening or good morning. We have 1 p.m. here in Iowa. So as Laura has just said, I'm currently affiliated to Iowa State, but the research which I'm going to present was done at the Institute of Animal Science because I did my PhD there. This presentation will be given together with my former master student, Ágnes Moravcsíková, because she has done a lot of work, particularly on this part of my PhD project. But I would like to start with a short introduction. So dairy cows are usually separated from their mothers within 24 hours after birth and housed individually until 2 months of their age, when they are housed in groups and weaned from milk. However, group housing in early life has been found to have many positive effects on calf social behavior, learning abilities, or emotional states. Pair housing has been also found to improve calf ability to cope with stress after weaning and also during testing in a novel arena. Moreover, many research finding has found positive effect of housing with a familiar conspecific on calf ability to on animal ability to cope with stress. Therefore, we could expect that group housing could also improve cows' ability to react with stress after disbudding through social buffering effect. Now a little bit about disbudding, because I'm aware that not everybody is familiar with this common husbandry procedure. So disbudding is removal of horn buds in calves of up to 2 months of age, and it is commonly performed on dairy farms to decrease the risk of injuries among cattle, but also towards people. The most common method of disbudding is disbudding with hot iron. We already know that disbudding is a painful procedure and that calves experience ongoing pain for at least 3 weeks after the procedure. Therefore, it is not so surprising that disbudding has several negative effects on calf well-being. For example, it decreases play or induces negative emotional states in calves. Besides, there are some ethical issues. First of all, the best current practice of disbudding is to administer a single dose of a sedative, a local anesthetic, and a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug. However, this medication doesn't eliminate all negative effects on calf well-being. The second issue is that some kind of medication for pain relief is administered to disbudded cows only in a very small percentage of farms. There are several reasons why. For example, it's about costs of pain relief medication. It is not for free. And also in general, we could say that producers and sometimes also veterinarians underestimate disbudding pain. Therefore, we need some additional or alternative solutions to improve welfare of disbudded calves. Here, I would like to emphasize that there are more of them, and it would be great if we could combine them to improve calf well-being. However, in our study, we only focused on social buffering as additional solution to improve relatively poor welfare of disbudded calves. And now I would like to invite my colleague Agnes, who is going to tell you something about our study, what exactly was done, and also she's going to tell you about our results, and then I will make some conclusions. Okay, so Agnes, floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. So thank you, Katarína. So based on those studies, what Katarína has told us, we decided to compare behavioral reaction of individually and pair-housed calves after disbudding. And we hypothesized that pair-housed calves would cope with disbudding better due to this effect of social buffering. So specifically, we hypothesized that they would have smaller decrease in behaviors indicating improved welfare after disbudding, such as eating, ruminating, resting, exploration, and play. And they would have smaller increase in pain-related behaviors, such as head shaking, head rubbing, foot stamping, and self-grooming, compared to individually housed calves. You can take the next slide, please. Thank you. So altogether, we had 34 heifers. They were separated from their mothers within 12 hours after birth. And then for approximately 8 days, they were housed individually. After that, they entered our experiment and they were randomly assigned to pair housing or individual housing. And as you can see, we had 12 focal calves from pair housing and 10 from individual housing. The hot iron disbudding was done where they were 8 weeks old, and we used local anesthetic to numb the nerves around the hormat, and it was applied 15 minutes before the procedure happened. So we observed all calves in their home pen. We observed the first 20 minutes, 24, 12, 9, 6, 4, 3, 2, and 1 hours before and after disbudding. And we used 1-0 sampling method with 1 minute intervals to observe behaviors which could show us improved welfare after disbudding or pain-related behaviors, but I will get more into it on the next slide. And then we calculated sums of each behavior for each calf, and we used general linear models to test our hypothesis, and the dependent variable was difference between behaviors pre and post disbudding. And we had housing, body weight gain, and interaction between housing and body weight gain as fixed effects. We can move on.
Okay. Okay, just trying to, okay.
Yeah, great. And as you can see, we have few behaviors which could show us improved welfare after disbudding, such as eating, forage, ruminating, resting, exploration, and play. And then we had behaviors that could indicate pain after disbudding, such as head shaking or rubbing the head against the wall, or foot stamping and self-grooming.
Okay.
So we found that head shaking, head rubbing, and self-grooming increased in all calves after disbudding, but there was no difference. Can you move it a little bit? There was no difference between individually and pair-housed cows in ruminating, resting, pain-related behaviors, and play. The different what we found was that disbudded pair-housed calves, they ate hay more often than individually housed calves, which you can see also from this graph, where on the y-axis we have changes in behaviors for 24 hours pre and post disbudding, and the red color represents pair housed calves, and the blue one represents individually housed calves. So I will give it back to you, Katka.
Okay, thank you. So we think that more frequent feeding in pair house cows may be an indication of improved welfare in disbudded cows through a social buffering effect. We think so because of two research findings. Sorry, I'm just cannot move my slides right now. Okay, so first finding is that in general, animals decrease feeding when they are experiencing some kind of stress. And next research finding is that cows disbudded with a local anesthetic were found to spend more time feeding compared to cows disbudded without any pain relief medication. But of course, we are aware that further research is needed to assess some other variables such as emotional states or physiology to make some overall conclusion on the effect of social buffering in disbudded calves. So your take-home message is that pair house cows in our study ate forage more often compared to individually housed cows, and this could be an indication of improved welfare of disbudded cows through social buffering effect. Here, I would like to acknowledge the Czech Ministry of Agriculture as they provided funding. We are also very grateful to our supervisors, Marek Špinka and Radka Šárova, but also to other people who were involved in this project. And of course, we are happy to have this opportunity to have this webinar, and also we are happy that you joined us today to learn more about welfare of disbudded cows. And I have one slide more. This is just to facilitate discussion a little bit. So we have published our paper in August, and during peer review process, we had a very nice experience with reviewers. Because the discussion of our result was very interesting. They made several very useful points, but they were also a little bit concerned if what we found actually was an indication of social buffering, but finally we were quite convincing, so we could have published this paper under title Indication of Social Buffering in Disbudded Cows, but we would love to hear opinions of other researchers in our field. So please feel free to type into the chat what you think. So do you think that increased frequency of feeding forage is indication of social buffering in disbudded cows or not? We would be really grateful to hear your opinions, and this is all we have. So I guess there will be some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Katarína and Agnes, for that presentation. And it's not answering your question, but while we're waiting for other questions, I have a question to go with your question. And so your main finding was that forage feeding behavior was increased in pair house calves, and perhaps that was indicative of improved recovery from the disbudding. Did you by any chance look at forage feeding before and after disbudding? Because there are several studies that have found that pair house calves eat more and are less fearful of new feed just in general compared to individually housed calves. And could it be that pair house calves were eating more forage in general in your study? And so how do you tease this apart from the buffering effect?
Yes, okay, so of course we also explored or analyzed our data from different various points. So we really wanted to see what's there. So we also analyzed data before this budding. So there wasn't any difference in any of these behaviors. So feeding was pretty same in individually and pair house cows also before this budding.
And do you have any feedback for how can you say that it is buffering? What is it about feeding behavior that indicates that there's some sort of positive effect of the calves working together after a painful procedure?
Well, so as I said, especially on my last slide, so based on our discussion with reviewers as well, so our findings, I would say, aren't so strong because we measured some other behaviors and there wasn't anything, for example, in play. But I also need to say that we didn't have a so big sample size, so there can be error 2, I think it is called. But as I said, so we think that they somehow recovered. So they were more resilient due to social buffering effects. So they somehow started to feed sooner compared to individually housed cows. But we also, for example, we also measured socially keen if it increased after this budding in pair house cows, and also social resting, for example, and licking was also active and passive, but we didn't find anything there. So what exactly was there, we don't know, and maybe that is why we would be thankful for some additional feedback from other researchers, what they think.
Great, thank you. We have some questions coming in from Stigen. How did you compare play behavior since social play could only perform in pair housing?
Oh yes, this is not the exact comparison because we also had discussion when we were planning our study. So we weren't sure if it would be best compare the same play behaviors in both treatment or also include social play in case of pair house cows, and we finally decided to do it. So it is not exact comparison. So yes, there can be 2 different approaches, I would say, to include social play in pair house cows or exclude, and we opt for including it.
Great. Andre says, is disbudding a female calf without pain medication, will that affect her fertility afterwards?
Maybe I should give some space, Agnes. So Agnes, could you respond to this question?
I have never heard about that, so I don't remember. I don't know if we have some study about it. I have never read it, so I don't really know if it could affect fertility or not. I don't know.
I'm not
Do
sure.
you know some studies, Katka, about this topic? I don't know, so.
I don't think there are some.
On to the next one. Katarína says, thank you so much for the nice talk. Did you find pairs of calves that were particularly close with each other? We just started a setup in which we want to look at if cows have close friendships, and I would be interested if you observe differences between pairs.
So this is maybe another limitation of our study. So it would be great to somehow assess strength of the bond between our cows. We didn't do it, but what we observed was that, of course, there were differences. For example, we had one pair and one calf. In our opinion, really felt a little bit bullied by its social partner. So its social partner was really playful, and that calf was very calm. So it wasn't so good match. But in general, I would say they were performing well. So that it was really important for them to have some social partner, and yes, some of them were closer to each other, some of them weren't, but in general they had a good relationship or bond, or how to say that.
But if you would observe the video, then you would see that some of them there have more like social resting and some of them less. So yeah, it really depends. But we didn't analyze the difference between pairs. So
Yes,
yeah.
it would be good to quantify that, but we don't have that data.
Lindsay says, I wonder if differential forage intake between groups after disbudding could be similar to the differential sucrose consumption between mice that are or are not experiencing anhedonia, so less sucrose consumption in anhedonic mice. Do you have anything to add to that?
Well, maybe yes, it could. I agree. I'm not sure. Agnes, do you have anything to it?
No, not really. Yeah.
It's
I
possible.
think
Yes.
Well, that looks like all of the questions that have come through. We can wait a minute more, but thank you both so much for your presentation. Always good to know what's going on in the calf world, and it's nice also to have two people giving a presentation. So thank you both for your time and for answering the questions.
Okay, thank you as well. Have a good day or evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.